The following podcast is non-profit and is based on the IGCSE history curriculum. Hello listeners, in today's episode we will be discussing how influential Joseph Stalin of the USSR was to Saddam Hussein's rule over Iraq. Firstly, let's look at the nature of Stalin's rule. Firstly, let's look at the use of terror and purges. Stalin used the secret police force, the NKVD, to carry out a series of purges. People he considered to be a threat to his power from both the Communist Party and the army were forced to admit to made-up crimes in public show trials. Many of the leading members of the Communist Party were accused of being enemies of the state, found guilty, and executed. It is estimated that during Stalin's purges, 1 million people were either executed, tortured to death, or murdered. Now, let's look at Saddam's use of terror and purges. He used show trials, which were court cases in which opponents were put on trial for crimes that were often made up just to get rid of opponents. He killed around 4,000. He accused the Secretary General of the Revolutionary Command Council, Mashadi, of plotting to overthrow him and forced him to identify 66 other conspirators. Anyone who tried to overthrow him was severely punished. After an attempt to assassinate him in the village of Dujail in 1982, he ordered his security forces to kill 150 villagers in retaliation. Now, on to Stalin's use of cult of leadership. Stalin created a cult of leadership through the use of propaganda and indoctrination. Poems, books, and newspaper articles were written about him, and there were pictures and statues of him everywhere. Young people were also taught to adore him through school and youth groups. He was portrayed as a father-like figure and as the protector of communism. He was given credit for the defeat of Nazi Germany in World War II. Now, on to Saddam Hussein's use of cult of leadership. He used propaganda to make himself seem like a strong, heroic leader and the protector of the Arab states. Some types of propaganda were statues and pictures of him. Using newspapers, the radio, TV, and songs were written about him. He also made his birthday a national holiday. He believed that he was a true leader of the whole Arab nation, so he got into conflict with other leaders of Arab nations and sought out conflicts with them. Thirdly, let's look at Stalin's use of persecution of the opposition. Stalin used his secret police, the NKVD, to persecute anyone who opposed him or those whose loyalty to the USSR might be in doubt. When the kulaks, a group of wealthy farmers, opposed collectivization, they were killed or sent to forced labor camps called gulags. Soviet communists were atheists and therefore persecuted religious groups. Thousands of Orthodox Christian priests were killed or sent to gulags. Other religious groups such as Jews and Muslims were also targeted. Over 3 million people are thought to have died under Stalin's rule, although some historians place this figure higher, with estimates ranging from 6 to 20 million. Now, on to Saddam Hussein. He was determined to crush the Kurds who wanted more independence and their own homeland, Kurdistan, in northern Iraq. He killed many Kurdish leaders and ordered his air force to use chemical weapons to bomb the Kurdish town of Halabja, the Al-Anfal campaign. When the war with Iran ended in July 1988, he ordered his cousin to destroy the Kurdish nationalist movement, and his forces used chemical weapons and mass executions to destroy many villages, resulting in the deaths of around 180,000 Kurds. Shia Muslims wanted greater inclusion, but Saddam became suspicious of them and banned their shrines and pilgrimages, and destroyed a number of their villages as well. Now, we'll look at how they improved the standard of living in their respective countries. Firstly, Stalin. He helped the USSR to quickly modernize and industrialize through his 5-year plans. Factories were set, tough production targets, and new dams, canals, railways, and hydroelectric power plants were built. Farming was brought under communist control through collectivization, where farmers were forced to join their farms together and give 90% of their produce to the government. Farmers or workers who failed to cooperate were arrested and imprisoned. Healthcare and education was greatly improved as well, and it was made free. Now on to Stalin. Although they were only available to those loyal to his regime, Stalin did make some improvements to the standard of living. He used the profits from the sale of oil to improve healthcare, education, and infrastructure such as roads, electricity, and water supplies. He also ensured free healthcare and education, and traditional arts were subsidized by his government. Furthermore, he also allowed freedom of religious worship, evidently not so for Shia Muslims and Kurds, and ensured his government was free from corruption. Now, I'm going to make my own opinion on how successfully Saddam achieved his aim of creating a Stalinist state in Iraq. In my opinion, he was very successful. He was able to restrict the freedom of speech through his secret police and use propaganda, similar to Stalin, to promote himself as a leader. He was also a brutal dictator, as he persecuted and killed around 180,000 Kurds and executed his opposition. However, he did not kill as many people as Stalin did, but this could be due to the lower population in Iraq and the higher population in Russia. Now, this is just my opinion. You can look at the evidence and determine your own opinion as to how successful Saddam was at creating a Stalinist state in Iraq, and you can decide what the factors of this Stalinist state were in Iraq. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. I hope it helped you in some way in terms of maybe revising for your upcoming exams in the future. Now IGCSE results have been released. I understand that there was some discrepancies in Cambridge's grading system and also Edexcel's. In Hong Kong, now we have been given the option, at least as far as I know in Hong Kong where I am, we have the option to, or Cambridge is going to default to the grades given by our teachers. I also know in the United Kingdom for the local GCSEs, they are being given the option to choose, I think, 3 choices. This, of course, varies by country around the world, and don't quote me on anything I'm saying. This is just from what I have heard. But I hope that everyone is happy with their IGCSE grades, and I wish everyone all the best in the future. Thank you again for listening to my podcast. This is the end of the podcast. Thank you for listening. Please consider using the links in the description below to leave a voice message for me, leave feedback for me, or visit my website which hosts additional revision material. Depending on which app you are listening to this on, you could also rate and review the podcast. Thank you.